Okay,
Shalom.
so welcome.
Welcome
to another program of Tzuzamen. Hi, Tzipi.
Hi, Tzili. And we are here in order to oil our brain cells. I mean, you know, so it is, so we chose somebody that it would be very nice and pleasant to, you know.
Always fresh.
Always fresh. So, Tzili, would you like to?
Etgar Keret, the writer. I think that we don't have to add because I think everybody knows Etgar Keret, and the writer and playwright and the filmmaker.
Yes.
And filmmaker.
And now he did a television show.
A television show.
Because we have to relate
art
to it.
Project.
Wait. I'm going to ask, but later, because I just remembered that you did an art project with Pinto.
In Pinto.
Pinto, and I forgot his name in Japan, and Tzili showed it in her gallery
in Times Square.
Square, and later, please, tell me about it, okay?
Yeah.
But I have to remember because you know there's
so
many.
I remind you.
No, there's so much chaos in my mind from.
Tzipi is listening to 17 networking at once, both in Israel and in New York, and then she gets such a big headache, and every time she says something else that is about something else, but it's all connected. So
it's all connected.
It's all connected.
So do you want to consult something?
Oh, yes. I want to ask you, Etgar. You know, I live in New York for many, many, many years now. And many years.
Okay.
30 years. And you know, by the way, that in the beginning, when I came to New York and I asked everybody, I was like terrified. I asked everybody, how long are you here? And they told me 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. I got scared and I said, this doesn't sound good. And they said, oh, don't worry, it goes fast. And then I realized in the beginning that I don't count the years that I'm here when I calculate time. So I used to calculate and I go backwards. And if somebody asked me about when was this, and I calculated something, and then all of a sudden, over time, it didn't work together. And I said, something is missing. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't go chronological. And I realized that I don't count the years that I'm here. I had a totally separate.
I think it's a new anti-aging startup.
That's a good one. But then afterward, I said, all right, what am I going to do? I'm here anyway. So, okay. So I pile up the years and that's it. But it's now 30 years. So anyway, my DNA, my language DNA is rooted in Hebrew. Doesn't matter how many years I'm outside of Israel. And it's my navigation in the language is not the same. You know, I'm totally different person in Hebrew, totally different person in English. And although I'm comfortable in the English language and basically not always clear, I'm not always clear. And sometimes I hear myself say, what am I saying? Because it depends on my emotional status or if I'm tired or not. And because I have all kind of versions, but I'm not free. Well, first of all, my vocabulary in Hebrew, of course, is much bigger and larger and wider, but I'm also much freer. So I can really navigate freely between all the fields of my imagination and reality, which I don't have in English the same way.
You don't have the nuances also.
No, it's like, it's not the same because my world is shapes and colors. So I can translate it in Hebrew much better. In English, it's more strict and it's not, I don't like it many times. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, because you run around the world a lot and you perform a lot and you read your stories a lot. When you read a story in English outside of Israel, do you feel home in your story as much as you feel home when you write it and read it in Israel in Hebrew?
It's a little bit like, let's say, if the story is my wife, then it's like going to an event with my wife where she has to wear high heels, you know?
Wow.
So she is my wife, but it's a little bit awkward. Like in her pajamas, she behaves in a more free way.
Yeah, but
By the way, just a second, in the beginning, I have to say something. When I used to go with Leon to events and everybody wore high heels.
Leon is
and
her deceased husband.
My late husband.
Late husband.
We used to go to events, black tie events, and you need to dress up and they wear heels, and I can't. I never wear heels, I can't stand
You're
it.
so tall, you don't need
That's
heels.
right, that's right.
You know how many, I'm sitting on 2 pillows.
So once Leon told me, you need to wear high heels. Why? And then, so I did, I took low heel. So he said, you walk very awkward. I said, I want to see you walking on these things and then come to me. So then there was a big event for him. So I wore boots, with the laces. And he said, what's that? I said, nobody cares for me. It's all about you. Nobody looks at my feet, and I can bring you a note from the doctor. Just leave me alone. And we never spoke about it again. I always wore what I wanted, and that's it, against all the rules. It's impossible.
But she just, first I wanted to ask you, which I will delay for a minute, about what happened in the translation of, when you write in Hebrew and then it's right, but I will wait for a minute and jump really far. Because she mentioned that she told her husband, why don't you think, what does it mean from a point of view of a woman? So one of my questions much later was, and correct me if I'm wrong, can you write from a point of view of a woman?
Oh, I did. I wrote quite a few, not many stories, but
Not
I
many.
would say maybe a dozen stories written from a woman's point of view. But look, I write stories from a hired killer point of view, from an elderly demented person's point of view, from a rabbit's point of view. So I think it would say something very bad about me if I couldn't write a story from a woman's point of view.
But do you, forgive me, I'm not a scholar. Well, I will say it, I'm a professor in film and television at NYU, but I'm not other things, I'm really very careful. Even about films, I'm careful. So when you portray women, do you portray them as confused or
no, so I want to say something.
Stuck like the men?
So when I portray a character, it's not as if, like, I don't know, I read a lot of researches, and I write about a construction worker, so I go and work for 3 days. I never do that. I think it's when they talk about creativeness, they say that there are like two models. Okay, the model of the lamp and the model of the mirror. There are those kind of creators that seek things in the world and wants to describe them, and there are writers a little bit like me that basically, when they write about a situation, when they write about a character, they imagine themselves in this situation. So I can give you an example. When I wrote a story about a hired killer, I wanted to find some kind of an affinity between me and that hired killer. And the story begins with him receiving a contract, like the photo of a person he needs to kill in an envelope. And he says, even before I open the envelope, I know I'm going to kill this guy. Why? Because if I say to myself, I'll take it out, and if it will be a smiling baby or an innocent elderly woman, and I say, oh, no, this I can't kill, then I can write myself out of business, because nobody deserves to die. So you either kill everybody or you don't kill anyone. Now, when I wrote this paragraph, it was a paragraph that I took from myself, because this is my ideology when it comes to publishing stories. So if I write a story and I say, oh, this story will offend my aunt, or this story, my ex-girlfriend will discover that I never liked having sex with her, or something like that, then I never take that into consideration. I ask myself, is it a good story or is it a bad story? And I say, if I start thinking about the effects it has on life, then basically literature will lose its kind of autonomous role for me. So by finding something in a killer that I could recognize in myself, I had some kind of a a holding to the character, and from it I wrote the other things. So, for example, when I write a story, outside, by the way, it's written from a feminine point of view. So when I write a story, then basically the let's say the main thing that I could give my character is that she's very sensitive to smells. So you can imagine there
Yes,
is a woman who's very
yes, of
sensitive
Sure.
course,
to
me.
smell. But it's not like I say, oh, I'm going to write a story about a woman. So I will start with her period and then talk about her maternal experiences. No, I write a story about a human being, and I say, okay, what can I connect in my mind that will work with that character, you know? So it's something I don't think that my aspiration is that when I write a story, you say, oh, I want to learn more about women, so I read more Edgar Keret's
To
characters.
what extent you involve your personal life? Do you have like a red line, how
No.
much to bring from your family, from your friends into the story, or you just go all the way?
I go all the way, but what I can say is that there is something about the way that I write my story that it's like kind of a cyber mechanism. When
Mm.
I put my life out there, but it's totally coded. So in a sense, when I write a story, I'm always afraid that people will discover stuff about me. But I see that when I read them, they can connect to the emotion, but they don't know the real context. So the moment that you move it into fiction, you're kind of safe, because let's say if I write a story about me talking to somebody, and in the middle thinking how it would, imagining how I could murder that person, and I don't know, throw him or her to the river, then you read the story and you say, oh, I know this kind of anger. I recognize it in me. But you'll never know if I wrote a story about you or about somebody else.
But
So it's both, it's kind of, it's truthful. It's a little bit like, imagine somebody coming to court and saying, I killed 3 people, but I won't tell you what's their name, when I did it, or where it was done. You can't put the guy in jail. You know he's a killer, but you can't put him in jail. So everything you think about, you
So
can
you
learn a
cover
lot about me
yourself
from the
basically.
yeah,
characters.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but but you never know what I fantasized, what I dreaded, what I actually did. So it does give you this kind of protection.
So wait, so before I understood it, you don't protect your characters and you don't protect people around you. You just write what you feel like, what you want.
Yeah,
But
I
To
protect
protect
them
his
when it comes
writing.
to nonfiction. For example, when I write a nonfiction piece, I will not publish it if my wife, my son, my friend will say, we don't want you to tell people
Right.
yeah,
that, I don't know, that
yeah.
we make fun of cats. I don't know, it will look
Yeah.
bad in our CV.
No,
So I will
I
not
do the
write it.
same. I do the same. When I happened to me in my documentaries, I took out characters because it will change their life in a way that they don't want. And I said, life is more important than
Yeah, so
the
so so
documentaries.
so so when I do it with nonfiction, it's totally justifiable for myself. But let's say if my son did something that is, I tell you something. Let's say in my last collection, Glitch at the Edge of the Galaxy, there is a character called Mikhail Varshavsky, and he's this really bitter Ashkenazi second generation guy who fights with everyone. Now this guy is based on me when I was 6 years old, but
Six.
I wrote him as a 56 years old man. So I took things that I remember, because let's say this guy, he's very angry that his mother, who is a Holocaust survivor, can't go to entertainment facilities on Holocaust Memorial Day. So this sounds like a ridiculous idea. Why would somebody be angry that a cinema or is closed on Holocaust Memorial Day? But when I was a child in Israel, and both my parents were Holocaust survivors, and on Holocaust Memorial Day, all the stuff on TV was about the Holocaust. All the songs in the radio were about the Holocaust. All the newspaper were about the Holocaust. And I saw my parents already terrified from these days that will come in a week, a day in which they cannot suppress their traumas. Then, as a child, I thought that the role of Holocaust Memorial Day was to torment Holocaust survivors. I thought that that it was this kind of a
Wow.
disgusting initiative of government officials who didn't like Holocaust survivors like my parents, and they wanted to show them. So when I became 7 years old, I understood that my theory was wrong. But here I took this theory and put it in the mind of a well-educated 50-something-year-old person. So nobody can trace it or judge me for that, or judge me as a 6-year-old for that, because what I write in the end is fiction. It's a story.
Yeah, but if I take all the pieces, if I was able to take to devise a program or something, can I create from all these stories a puzzle? Get the puzzle of you at the end of the day?
I don't know if you can or you can't, but for sure all the ingredients are there.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm saying some of those ingredients are really not that apparent in real life. For example, in many of my stories, there is a lot of aggression. But you know, in real life, I'm a vegetarian since the age of 5 because I saw Bambi and didn't want to torture animals, and I'm a little smiley guy. But this aggression exists in me, even if I don't express it.
Everybody, forgive me,
Yes.
everybody.
So I'm saying that it's
But you
like
channel it through your stories. You don't do it in your personal life, but you channel it, you use it. So
He's afraid of it. You should be afraid. I'm afraid of
it's a
it.
good solution to survive it well.
You know, I remember a long time ago, wow, how long? I remember anyway, I don't know if I should tell the story, but Kissinger came to Israel and a lot of West Bank settlers came in Jerusalem, and I just wanted to experience it. But I was amazed by the sense of violence that came out of me. And that's the first time that I realized I have violence. Can you believe it? And by the way, later I was writing Tel Aviv, Berlin, where I did ask, are we accountable of what we are doing, what we did in Lebanon, what we are doing in the West Bank? Are we accountable? So no, we all have this. And by the way, just sorry, but Shalom Chanor just came up with a new song.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about, you know, that going down, it's the bad and the good are going at the same time, you know? And then I think I also used Goethe, who said the sun shines on the bad and the good. And, you know, I don't know about you. So are you?
But wait a second, I have to tell you something funny about Kissinger. When Kissinger came to Israel, I think he came to Israel, I was in high school, maybe 11th grade, I don't remember. And we had a stationery store next to the school. And then he married, these were the days that he married Nancy Kissinger. And you remember, she's a very, very tall woman. So I remember once in the break between the classes, I went to the store to get something, and they had old ladies selling. And one of them looked at me and she said, "You see, it's okay. Even Nancy got married."
That was a story with a twist. I liked it.
It was so funny.
Yeah. So I guess I know we took, you know, not a side road, a very important road about it. You know, I don't know if most people in Israel really feel accountable for what we are doing.
Well, the truth is, you know, I'm not a sociologist, or so you know, at most I can talk either about myself or about the human condition. All the stuff in the middle, I get confused. I think that usually people live in a very subjective sphere, telling themselves the stories that would make them feel best with themselves, and most of those stories are not true. You know,
But leaders cannot do it.
What?
Leaders cannot do it. For my,
Oh, we
they
have
do
a
it all the
leader
time,
doing it all the
terrible.
time.
But they shouldn't, because then they cannot have the truth or the right vision. It's all distorted.
It is distorted. It is distorted. But I'm saying, you know, it's. I think that the gift of writing is, for example, let's say I have some kind of an experience. I fight with a guy in the store, and then I come and I write a story about the situation. So when I fight with the guy in the store, I feel righteous. I feel like I'm Jean of Arc of the consumers. I feel like I'm the Mahatma Gandhi of the buyers in the store. I'm not fighting for the 5 shekels. I'm fighting for the principle, you know. But when I write a story about it, it basically you change the point of view. If you all the time see your life from this angle, when you write a story, you put the camera up there,
Right.
and your responsibility as a writer is to understand your character. So when I fight with the guy in the store, I don't feel any empathy towards him. You know, if he would fall down and die, I would say you had it coming. But when I write a story, I'm basically this guy's father and mother, because I invent this character, I invent his thoughts, so I cannot alienate myself from him. So I feel that there is something about my experience with art that it makes me much more accountable for my action. You know,
Right.
I can write a story and then go to my son or my wife or my brother and say, listen, I'm really sorry about what happened 2 months ago. I just realized that you were in this situation, or that you mentioned to
I
that.
really wrote it down. I
Uh,
really asked myself if through your characters, you actually discover things about you.
So I can say that you know it's a spoiler, but I don't think that you're gonna see it very soon. But is it in the miniseries that I did with Shira?
Yeah.
Then it's basically it's a story about a person who insists on having closure with his parents,
Oh,
and basically at the end, the thing is that he can reach closure with his father, but he cannot reach closure with his mother because she's dead. And in the end, he goes back in time to meet her when she's young to achieve closure with her.
wow.
So the idea, I think that there was something about this idea that it's exactly what I do when I write. You know, I go back to 3rd grade, and you know, and I know that the girl that stabbed me with a pencil and which I hated there was actually she actually liked me and she was trying to get my
It was
attention. But I
courting you.
need to write this story 40 years later to understand that.
Right.
It's like therapy, only cheaper.
I know you don't pay for a psychiatrist, but tell me something. You know, I don't want to annoy you, but I think that most people are looking up and expecting people like you to be the compass of the truth of
The
how
beacon of ethics.
to find the right
Yeah.
way to point out, you know, the base of morals and values for us. I don't know if you know that.
So first of all, I want to say that writers, they serve different functions in different societies. In Israel, uh, based on the Hebrew expression "Atzofe lebet Israel," the role of the writer is special because you know the most famous writer that wrote in Hebrew was God. So there is something very holy about the written Hebrew language. And you know, and we were lucky enough to have writers like the late Amos Oz or David Grossman
Right.
that they are really like a secular prophets. They are,
Yes, absolutely.
and this function, I want to say, it's not universal. It's Israeli. Now, for me, as a young person, I was a reader, but when I would read Amos Oz, I would say, oh my God, I can never be a writer because here's a guy who knows the way and I don't. But then I discovered writers like Kafka or Bashevis Singer that really don't, in a sense, they do have ethics, but they are no role model to anybody. And I thought to myself, I cannot write like Oz, but I can write in the vein of Shalom Aleichem or Kafka or Bashevis Singer, that there are people who do not write from let's say, some kind of a superior position of a mentor, but write sometimes even from an inferior position of somebody who runs to you in the street and say, excuse me, lady, listen, what should I do? What should I do? My daughter, she all the time, she curses me. What should I do? So I feel that my writing position, it's a position that is more about trying to get the questions right.
Mhm.
But it very rarely offers answers.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
okay.
think that people, since people read writers and they think that they express themselves easily, they expect them to really settle on the beacon and say, hey, you guys write the ethics for us because we're looking up to you. But not, as you said, not every writer is a beacon. They just...
No, I actually think that the truth is that most writers are not in real life.
Mhm.
But many writers don't take these positions as writers. I
Right.
don't know if you read from contemporary writer Gary Steingart. You know, Gary Steingart, you don't read his book and say, oh, this guy must babysit my babies. You know that he's going to flush them in the toilet and then apologize, you know? So there are many writers that we know. It's like that express all sides of humanity. You know, for example, one of my favorite singers, if not my favorite singer, is Bob Dylan. Now, I don't know Bob Dylan, but judging from his work, he's not a nice guy.
You're right.
No, but it doesn't matter because when he sings, how does it feel to be on your own, like a Rolling Stone with no empathy, but even with spite, he's talking about a side that also exists in me.
But you
So-
relate
so-
to his creation, not to his personality. And that's the thing, because I can relate to something that somebody is putting out there. I don't know the person and I don't know anything
But you
about
judge
him,
him by his actions.
but I
Yeah,
judge
yeah,
him by his writing, and that's
I-
what I relate to.
Yeah, but I'm even saying something different. I think that when Tzipi says, like, I don't know, when I read a writer, I imagine or I expect him to be a compass, somebody who's very ethical or somebody who knows things. So I say it's a little bit like saying when I think about an actor, I think about somebody very handsome. So what does it mean that Joe Pesci is a bad actor? You know, that Steve
Laughing.
Buscemi is a bad actor? That, you know, the idea is that there is a difference between some kind of concept that we have of an idea or a position,
That's because we don't have
and the
leaders.
diversity that we have in it. It's like,
We
you know,
need it.
But it's
But-
not only about leadership. I think it's about very humble human, basic human need to look up towards somebody. And they think that if you can do something that they cannot do, they would like to hear you. And many people are not even put themselves in a position of thinking of their own or saying of their own. They're looking for somebody else to say it for them, or somebody that they can relate to something that they say. And then when they don't hear it, they get upset. So in a way, it's not fair.
But you know,
No,
also don't forget, okay, in your stories,
yeah, I just want to say something that has to do with filmmaking. So it's, I think maybe it's something that can be relatable, but I forgot what I want to say. So it doesn't matter.
because I disturbed you as usual. No, I
What?
just wanted to say that, you know, people read your books, they do, I think, are able to externalize the internal, what they really either feel and don't want to acknowledge, like what we talking before, you know, the around characters with a bed and things that we don't want even to look at ourselves this way. But somehow I don't think that most people are able, maybe this is what we expect from writers, to take it and make it bigger than myself.
Yeah, but look, if I try to go to the essence of writing, or at least of my writing, is basically the ability to empathize, to feel empathy toward the other. But now I think that we live in some kind of a paradox, because I think that all of us, or not all of us, or many of us understand that empathy is is important, not only from an ethical point of view. It kind of like, it makes your experience of life much wider, because if you feel empathy toward people, it's a little bit means that you can see the world from different angles, that you can be happy with people, that you can notice when they're sad. So everybody wants to be empathic. But at the same time, the reason that why we're usually not empathic is that from a Darwinistic point of view, empathy is a problem. You know, if a lion eats a deer, and while eating the deer, he connects to the deer's pain, then his ability to hunt will be damaged. So, for example, if you fight with somebody over a parking place, then you don't say, "Oh, this guy is obese. It will be difficult for him to walk home. Maybe I should give him his parking." Or look, I don't know, he has a kid in the back, and the kid really looks like a disgusting kid, and now he'll have to do all those roads and look for parking with this kid nagging him. You don't. You say, "What the fuck? I was here first. Move your car. No, move your car." And for us, he's the enemy. When I stand in a queue, you know, if you ask me, if if you could go like this, and all the people in front of you in the queue will die, turn to dust, and it will be your turn, then my first urge would say, "Let's do it, guys." I don't know any of them anyway, but but the idea is that this kind of a pragmatic aspect is just a very limited part of humanity, and the thing about art, that art allows us to liberate it. It allows us to be in a place that is it's safe enough to feel fully empathic. You know, we read books about murderers, we read books about sexual offenders, we feel sorry when they're executed, I don't know, in a movie or in a book. And the reason that we can do all that is that we know that we're safe, that we are not in a position where anybody can hurt us. And I think that you know, in Hebrew we have this word tikkun, you know,
Tikkun,
your ability to correct something in you.
right?
So I think that there is something about literature, that it offers us this kind of tikkun,
Yes.
this ability to listen without being afraid, or to listen without being aggressive, and then we can keep this space in ourselves alive, even if we won't use it all the time.
So how do we get to a point when it's safe to listen, to have empathy? No, to our neighbors. No,
Okay,
I go to the politics, because you know this is,
no, it's not politics.
except the virus now. This is the most. We don't talk about it. It's not on the table anymore. There is no discussion, no conversation, nothing. But when you think about
No,
it,
there is a
it dictates our life.
yeah, no, but I'm afraid, Tzipi, that you know that the people who vote in Israel, who are very interested in this problem, and who think that they have a solution for that, it's a very small group. You know, I belong to this group, but looking at the coming election, you know, we see the Labour Party, that was the ruling party, and always either the biggest or the second biggest one, and now
They have only
a
9
party that
people.
used to get 35 or 40% of the vote is going to get 5% of the vote. So I mean, if there are many reasons for that, you know, some of them I can empathize with the people who feel them, some of them I can't, you know, but I think that in general, if I may say something a little bit reductive, we are really humanity is going through some kind of process of devaluation, de-evolution. It's like when you look at stuff that happened in the US in the last year, you'd say I couldn't have imagined it 10 years ago.
Right.
People, you know, doing what they're doing, or acting the way that they do. I don't know, a candidate for president having a video of him saying, or recording of him saying, when you meet a woman, grab her by the pussy, and then getting elected.
Yes.
You know, would you imagine, I don't know, Lincoln do it? Could you imagine JFK doing it? No,
Maybe
You
not
mentioned,
Clinton.
but you mentioned the last 10 years, and I think that I'll talk specifically about the Americans. They didn't really want to see many things. They were pushing it and hiding a
Suppressing
lot
it,
of
yeah.
it behind very thick walls, so nobody has to touch it. And if you really look at what's going on in the last decade in the United States, I don't think that many people would be that surprised that Trump was elected, because it was built
No,
up.
I totally agree with you, and I have a lot to say about that. But I'm not talking at it from a political point of view. I'm talking
Right.
at it from the point of view. It's like I'm saying, Nixon was dishonest, but he was very much concerned that people will not catch him in a lie.
Mhm.
I think that for me, Trump doesn't interest me as a person,
No, not.
but it interests me as a phenomena.
Yes.
A guy who goes on as the president of the US and say, how about if you drink some detergent, maybe it will kill all the viruses? Then the idea is that a guy with the Trump intelligence and views, we would expect that even if he thinks this thought, he will not ask that in a press conference in front of an entire nation. But he does, and actually people don't care. So I'm saying the change is not in our leader. The change is in humanity, and I think that we are going through a process in which it's much more legitimate to say, I don't care for ethics, or I don't care for human rights. I want to make more money, and I would like to have more sex, and I would like to eat better food, and the rest actually I don't care.
I'm
And
really worried
and
that ethics is losing its
yeah,
position, and it happens a lot, too much, and for too many years, and people don't
and
even
it happens
stop it
worldwide. It happens worldwide.
everywhere. You
And
know, even the little video that was running through the networks in Israel a few days ago about
Yeah, but the family,
about
Palestinian
the
family,
Palestinian family that went to a
picnic
picnic in the forest, and a few settlers,
with a gun.
very, very, very right-wing settlers, the Hills guys with the guns, came and bothered them and just kicked them out of there. And they were trying to fight it gently, but they were so mean and so brutal. And then on the top of it, the soldiers came and just kicked everybody out, also mean, and you can see that people don't care.
but Tzipi, I know you're a super intelligent woman, but this is a moment where I can feel that you've been in the US for 30 years, because 2 weeks before that, the same kind of settlers beat up the TV news guy, Oad Chemo, who covers this thing, and you saw on tape that they hit him with sticks,
The stick.
and nobody got arrested, and
Right.
nobody got indicted, and nobody got stopped. So I'm saying,
But I see it all the time, and I'm in Israel a lot, and I'm active in Israel enough to not to avoid these things.
yeah,
But
yeah,
what
no,
bothers me, it
so I'm
bothers me
saying
that it takes place. It takes place all the time. Look, they hurt soldiers. The soldiers are there to
yeah, no,
defend them, and they hurt.
but what I want to say is that for me the change is not in that, because occupation
Yeah.
is ongoing, and it was before media. I think that the change is, for example, when our prime minister, who advocated
Right.
the fact that the prime minister should be only chosen for 2 terms, and is running for his sixth or seventh or
Forever.
eighth
Yeah.
term, doesn't feel that he needs to say, oh, I said that, I changed my mind, I apologize, I did something wrong. Because
Right.
it's okay. It's a little bit like, some kind of a machinery is at the moment that you switch off your country, they go to sleep, they wake up, they're not supposed to remember what you said
Right.
yesterday.
It's like everybody is on numb, on a numb status.
But no, I'm afraid. Are you afraid?
So I want to say numb is maybe, trying to understand the expression, but the experience. But what I'm saying objectively is that, let's say, it's not that the bar was lowered, it just does not exist. I really think that if a commentator in a CNN, in the middle of talking about the news, will say to you, I tell you what I think about the news, and he will crap on the table, he will have 5 million more followers on his social
Right.
media networks. It's like, in Israel, I'm just saying, I don't always see the news, but I was switching between 3 channels, I think, which we only have 3 channels, a broadcast channel, and in all of them, in the same time, they had a story about a woman that shouted at LeBron James in a Los Angeles Lakers game.
Yeah.
And you say, this kind of bothering, uncomfortable moment for LeBron James, that for 5 seconds he said to somebody, stop cursing me or whatever. These 5 seconds were the highlight of this woman's existence.
Yes.
It's really
Right.
like, because she was on all networks. So you really say the moment that you kind of strip the ethics, then it's not about the sort of energies that you have. It's about the quantity or the quality. I talked to a group of children, and one of them told me, I admire Hitler. And I said to him, why do you admire Hitler? So he said, how many people do you know that are more famous than Hitler?
Amazing. Tell me something. Are you afraid? Because I'm asking you because I'm afraid. I find myself now even more afraid. I was not afraid until end of, I don't know, after the army. I didn't have a reason to be afraid because my socialization was that you don't listen to anybody, you just listen to what's happening here in Israel, not the outside world. And they really protected us, in the youth movement and everything. I never was afraid. And now, gee, I'm afraid.
I'm worried. I'm very worried.
So I want to say, first of all, like, I think you're intelligent people, so you're rightfully afraid. But also the way that I experience it is, I think that the world is changing in an accelerated way. So this acceleration gives us some kind of feeling of a lack of control.
Yes,
It's a little bit like,
absolutely.
you go with a car that goes really, really fast. Now, when I look at my son, who's 15 years old, he was born to this reality. And he was born to the fact that you live a life in which nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, in which you learn things in such a manner that you know that maybe in a year you won't use it. Let's say when you learn an app, it's not like learning to drive a car and say, I'm going to drive for 60 years. You learn an app and you learn it good enough to be able to handle it for the next 6 months, because in 6 months you're going to move to another app.
Another one.
Yeah. So when I look at my son, for him, this is a reality. For me, it's a transition. Now, any animal, if you ever flew with a kitten, in this little
I flew with a
basket,
dog and she too.
yeah, they don't like transitions. We don't like transition. If I would be an animal, I would like to go to the river. I know that there are no lions in it, and drink the water every day with no change for the rest of my life. Now, this transition is creating a new reality. Now, to say that I feel that I understand reality less, for sure. To say that the word that waits for my son, by definition or subjectively, will be a worse word, I'm not sure. Because I just give you an example. We are dealing with global warming. We are ruining the planet. We are ruining the forest. But if you read all kinds of researches, people say that in about 60 years' time, we will be able to transform our minds to computers
Yes.
and live in an environment in which we could communicate with all the people we want,
Yeah.
shut down all the people we don't want,
Yes.
create whatever reality we wish, And when I can say that, maybe it could intimidate you, but actually, if you think about it, it's really cool. The air can be polluted, but I don't drink air. I don't need air. I'm just a mind.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that a lot of the processes can intimidate somebody because of the transition, are processes that are so unpredictable in the good and the bad they can do. I just want to remind you, let's say when Facebook started, everybody said, oh, what a liberal, wonderful tool. Here we have a revolution in Egypt. Because of Facebook, you cannot use it for tyranny. But then we realized that actually it's the perfect tool for any populist leader. So it has good side, it has bad side. Apparently, the bad sides seem to be worse than the good side. But I don't know. But tomorrow we will have a cars with no drivers, so and there will be less pollution and no car accident, and we will have more time, so everybody would know how to play the piano because they'll have more
But
time.
I find more young people now who ask, what is the meaning of life? They don't know. They ask it. So what it's all about? What is the meaning of life?
But that's
especially
but
because
the
we are
example
told.
but the examples that I would get as a child, whenever I could say, I don't know, I'm unhappy with my life, and they would say, I don't know, if when coal miners were sent into the mine and they had to dig for 12 hours each day, when they climbed out, they were so happy to see sunlight and to know that they're alive and
Yeah.
that they can have a shower
Right.
and rest for 4 hours, and they were happy. So you're unhappy? And I
But there's
say,
a big gap between, let's say, we worried about climate and it makes us afraid. But when you think about the next step of technology, it's exciting. So it's much nicer to go towards the exciting things because it's like a new toy and you can play with this. But some of us are afraid of also from the excitement because still it's a change. So you're locked in between what you know and familiar with, but it's going to destroy you maybe, and then towards something that you have no clue what it is, but if you won't go there, it might destroy you as well.
yeah, but what I think is that again there is some kind of hubris in the position where, let's say, we say, oh, I don't know, I'm sad because humanity is going to be destroyed, and if humanity will be destroyed and Tzipi's dog will rule the earth and they make love to cocker spaniels all over the planet, would it be would it be worse? Would a word be worse? From what perspective? So I'm saying that things are going to happen. Will it be good for trees or for nature or for barren planet? Will humanity stop? If you tell me that in a 10,000 years humanity will stop existing, I'm not even saddened by that. It's not something that I can grasp or it's not in my perspective.
So let me tell you something. I noticed, okay, that it's very hard to get money today to make films about the Holocaust or about the conflict. And besides, I'm really worried that the Holocaust will not be here in terms of our, nobody will hold the torch. And
but I want to ask you a question
you are
about
a Holocaust, your parents and I have my family also. And I keep asking questions about the Holocaust, and I think that soon nobody will ask any questions.
But so my parents are also Holocaust survivor, and my parents had passed away. But I want to ask you a question. Do you think that people are going to forget World War I or the Titanic drowning?
No.
No. What I think,
Just the
think
That's an
proportion.
interesting question. Okay, can you please?
no, it's not a profession. The thing is that there are many historical actions that there's nobody alive. Nobody is still alive who saw Lincoln's assassination. But the fact that the situations there, fighting for equality, the danger in it, the opposition for it is still very much alive. When you see the debate between Republicans and Democrats, they're very much aware of the assassination of Lincoln. So I'm saying that I think that there is something symbolic in this thought that the last Holocaust survivor will die. So when the last Holocaust survivor will die, we will not be able to hug and comfort and cry. We will need to do the things that you do after 90 years pass or 100 years pass from an incident. But that's only that. And I think that many times there is something, we like to be self-immersed, usually in one emotion, when basically it's always a cluster of emotion. Think about the pandemic. The pandemic is horrible. It scares me. More than a million people died. economies were crushed. People will find themselves in the street. We were all sitting home and we were depressed. But if you look back at this year, I live in Tel Aviv in a very busy street. It's the first time I live in this apartment for 27 years that I hear birds in the morning. So I'm not saying it's worth it, but it's like my father, who was a Holocaust survivor. He always said to me when as a kid I said to him, he was very precise. So I said to him, was the Holocaust תקופה רעה, like a bad
A bad period.
period? I asked him as a little child, and he says to me, son, there are no bad periods. There are difficult periods and easy periods. And he said, personally, I prefer the easy periods. But I have to admit that I learned about myself much more in the difficult ones. And I think that, that in the end, when we try to kind of tag something, to say, it's bad, we're going down, we're going up, we kind of lose the complexity of the experience, and we can always keep trying to reach the goals that we want to, and not deteriorate into relativism, and at the same time accept ambivalence, accept complexity, accept the oxymoronic nature of our existence.
Yeah, but just to say that you talked about the birds, and I know that we stopped listening to birds. We stopped. I mentioned it in another program, but being able to just look at the movement of a leaf on a tree, we don't do it anymore. But with the Holocaust, personally, more than Lincoln and more than World War I and more, maybe because I know all these people who were there, but I always was hoping that it will change humanity. The questions that we ask about the Holocaust, like how a culture like that could produce this, and then we look at other cultures who are doing it now, and that's okay. We are not.
Well, for example, when you look at about the Holocaust, then if you want to see products of the Holocaust or internalizing the Holocaust, then let's say if you look at Germany and Japan in this crazy world that we're living, let's say they belong to the more fair countries, socially or
They're
as
trying to do it
liberal.
too.
Now, in a sense, I think that it's the people who lose the war, the people who have the to carry this mark of Cain, of that they are the ones who have to kind of deal with themselves and change. But when history doesn't judge you harshly, then you are excused. A little bit like Stalin killed more people than Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
But
Know that most of them.
but the Russians were never held accountable to it in the same way. If I'm not mistaken, if you take mass murderers, then one place under Hitler there is a prince I don't remember his name, from Belgium, that is responsible to murders of millions in Congo. So, but the people in Belgium never saw themselves the way the Germans saw themselves. They saw themselves as victims, as many Austrians saw themselves as victims without justification. And I'm saying that if you feel that you were done a great wrong, then it's not a good place to start a tikkun, a correction. You are busy with your shame and suffering and humiliation. The first step for change is to admit that you're doing something.
But the Poland is doing
right.
the Polish are doing the opposite now. They actually would like to have a law that you cannot. You should say that Poland was not really involved.
But by the way, this is not a Polish invention, because the Turkish did it with the Armenian genocide before.
Okay.
Before
They try to clean themselves.
I think it's again, I think that it's a sign for a regime that is not strong and stable, and for a society that is totally dichotomized, when people need laws to contain their history. I think like if you look at the healthy or the most advanced society, you wouldn't imagine such a law maybe in Denmark, right? Or you wouldn't imagine such a law, I don't know, in the Netherlands. But if somebody would say to you that in some kind of a tyrantship in Africa they have such a law, they say, okay. And what is the reason for that? The reason for that is that it's a little bit like confidence. If you're a martial artist and you go to a place, you wouldn't say to somebody, I'm going to punch your face, because you usually say to people that I'm going to punch your face when you're scared. And
Yes.
if you're confident enough, you wouldn't need to
Yes.
threaten them.
Yeah.
So I think that even here, like if the Polish psych didn't carry some kind of a heavy burden of self-guilt, they wouldn't want to do it. The same way that in Israel, when I don't know, whenever there is a movie that criticize the occupation, then the first thing people like Netanyahu or people from the government would say, I didn't see it and I don't want to see it. And I say, why? If you are not afraid, see it, make fun of it, say it's stupid. Why if somebody does a movie like Gatekeepers, that talks about the prime minister, the connection between the heads of secret service and the prime minister of Israeli history. If I would be a prime minister, this would be the first movie I would want to see. How was it with Ben Gurion? How was it with my predecessors? But Netanyahu doesn't want to see it. Why? If he totally thought he was right, he would really want to see it. And I'm saying,
Oh, that's very interesting. He said that he's afraid.
Of course, I'm really, I don't think that people learn from history. I don't think that people want to learn from history. And I think it's only like musical chairs, and disasters are happening all the time. And as we are close to the event, it's really burning in our bones. And then slowly, when you go further and the years passes by, you let go because you have to have room for other disasters. And unfortunately, it happens all the time. It will keep happening all the time. And I don't see it changing because people are the same and people are people. But it also, you have to move on because you cannot live with the heavy weight of the disaster non-stop. You can't, you just can't. You have to let go and you have to move. Personally, it's hard for you because it's your parents. But if you think about it, we are now living in a time that the page of this time is in the middle of the writing. We didn't turn the page yet. It's in the middle of the writing, and I don't know how long it will take. But all the other things are one page or few pages or few books that you just turn it and you learn about it. You don't really learn about it. You know it was there. You don't want to learn about it because you just want to save yourself from knowing and you want to move more. And it's very
he
natural.
Doesn't let us,
Right.
When we read your books, we cannot really get away, But I want to tell you the truth. I'm not trying to flatter you. But no, really, that you should kind of acknowledge your place. I hope you are, because in the midst of all this chaos and stuff, and look what we're talking about the best thing, about the Holocaust.
But you know what my mom always said, the deal is that if you believe all the good things that people say about you, you also need to believe all the bad things.
Well, of course, I just told you, we expect.
So she said you better be doubtful about both.
No, I just told you, we expect from you more. Tell your mom, she's passed away, right? But she's looking at us. But anyway, she should, anyway, I'm kind of proud of what you do.
The best part is that it's short and you focus quickly.
Yes.
So you don't need to sit with 400 pages and go through a whole process.
Right.
2 seconds, you're in, hold everybody.
2 seconds, but
but it's short and to the point. And
listen, I'm kind of sorry because it's kind of late and we don't want to hold you. However, there are some things I was not satisfied because I didn't get from you the whole thing of moving from one media to another and what is the difference between writing a book and, making a movie. Anyway, so we should.
We'll have more talks,
Yes. Okay, listen. She knows you much more than me. But, I kind of felt very comfortable. And I think that I really, some things you sent me to think about. I must tell you. Anyway, tell him thank you.
Thank you, Etgar. We'll see you more.
And thank everybody who came. And we'll
Yeah.
be here next week.
Next week.
And now we are going to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
Bye.
thank you so much.
Bye.
Unbelievable.
בתיאבון.
תודה.
Thank
ביי
you,
ביי.
thank you.